All big changes start with a swift kick in the ass. Join the journey of John Curran as they make conventional thought bend over and take a boot to the keister. Warning, listeners may notice a force equal to or greater than needed to get your ass moving. A swift kick in the ass, living life on your terms.
Welcome to another episode of A Swift Kick in the Ass. This is your host, John Curran. I'm waiting for my good friend, actually, Josh Wilk. Got a special episode planned for you today. It's going to be very cool because we're talking about something that I don't normally talk about on A Swift Kick in the Ass, and that is government and politics. So there's a new grassroots movement going on about our democracy. And it seems like democracy is almost a bad word these days, but it really should not be, because next year our country is going to be celebrating its 250th anniversary. So this group is called Renew Democracy 250. So just waiting for the founder of this group to enter, and we're going to start talking. It's going to be a good time. Hold on. Welcome to another episode of A Swift Kick in the Ass. This is your host, John Curran, and with me today, very, very special guest, a guy I have known since middle school, back when I was growing up in Hollywood, Florida. A good friend of mine, Josh Wilk. Now, you're going to ask me, why am I bringing Josh Wilk on Swift Kick in the Ass? Well, this is a new thing for Swift Kick in the Ass, and it's to discuss more of an organization that is a grassroots movement that is focused on government and democracy, politics, stuff that we don't really talk about here on this show. But it does impact our day-to-day life, and this is an important organization that I'm a part of. And Josh has a fascinating story, and he's the founder of this organization called Renew Democracy 250. So, Josh Wilk, welcome to Swift Kick in the Ass. As I told my listeners, I've known you a long time, since eighth grade. Or not eighth grade. It's fifth or sixth grade, really, isn't it?
Long time.
I mean, back when the dinosaurs roamed the earth, as my kids would say. But in any case, Josh and I have gone through a lot together. We've been friends for a long time, and I actually know Josh's family. Josh's mother died when Josh was very young, correct?
Yeah, I was 5, yeah.
So Josh's father raised him, and Josh's father was, and your brother, correct? I mean, you also have a brother. So your dad raised you, and your dad was an immigrant from Poland, correct? And he was a concentration camp survivor. I know that. And he was also a Nazi hunter, right?
All
So
true.
so Mr. Wilk was, I mean, your dad was probably such an impressive man. I don't know, I'm just wordless, speechless as far as how I feel about knowing and having met him. So I know he spoke 6 different languages, I think, or something like that. He spoke many different languages,
Like
um,
nine, yeah.
9 different languages, traveled the world, hunting Nazis and bringing justice, I guess, to this world. But fascinating. And more importantly, he raised you to look out for tyranny and, taught you about democracy, the meaning of democracy. So I guess I'm really on my soapbox and I should be letting you do all the talking. But tell me about why you started this organization, Renew Democracy 250.
I will, and I'm glad to do that. I want to honor my father and to speak about him for a quick minute, if you don't mind.
Oh, I don't mind. I would love that.
Yeah, so my father was born on an interesting day. He was born on November 11th, 1918. So if any of you recognize that date was known to be Armistice Day, which later did turn into Veterans Day. But Armistice Day was the day the agreement to end World War One ended. So that was the war to end all wars, and that was the end of World War One, and it was announced to the world, and it was a day of celebration and joy for the world because World War One was just devastating, and it was our first World War. So my family celebrated the birth of my father on that same day. The announcement came on the 11th minute of the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918. And my dad was born at 11 o'clock on November 11th,
Wow.
1918. So, what a precarious and interesting start. Of course, my family then, his family, didn't know that World War II was coming yet, of course, but they celebrated the end of World War One. They celebrated his birth. Little did any of them know that in less than 21 years, that their country was going to be invaded and quickly and completely taken. And so, as my dad grew up and in the 20s, and especially in the earlier 30s when he was old enough to know better, he really saw the rising of Nazism. It did not happen overnight, and it was not quick by any means. There was a lot of social and political change going on in Germany. They were very embarrassed about their loss in World War One. They had to pay heavily in reparations, and the country was really, really not too different than us now. That many citizens were very unhappy with their government, very much struggling and disenchanted with their socialist government, and they were looking for a change and a strong leader to come along. And sure enough, Adolf Hitler did come along, and he swayed the people. And so when my dad talked to me a lot about the changes that he saw as a youth and even in his teens approaching the war, those changes happened slowly, but many of them, and when I was younger and he would tell me about these things, and he did write a book too, they seemed innocuous. I would brush them off because times were good in America and we've all been privileged, even though some of us have been still struggled here and it's not
Mhm.
far from perfect in America. He, uh, he would tell me about them, and as a younger man, I would dismiss that because I never thought they were possible in America. But finally, all these years later, my dad is gone. He would be almost 100 and what 7 or 8
Maybe.
now. Yeah,
Yeah.
the things he told me are starting to look very familiar, and the changes to our government and the social changes going on and the shift in power. Uh, it sounds a whole lot like what he went through. And so that was the initial thing that raised my awareness. But just another brief bit about my dad. My dad did survive. His brothers didn't. His parents were killed. His brothers were killed. He didn't come to America until he figured out where everybody was in the family and there were no good records. So he went back to his hometown, and little by little, he found out everybody had perished. My grandparents were actually the town that we were from. Our family was from. Was actually the New Year, and it was New Year's Eve, which we in the Jewish religion is Erev Rosh Hashanah, and the Germans marched into our hometown on New Year's Eve, on the Jewish New Year's Eve, and burnt everybody in the temple and burnt the temple to the ground, and that's where my grandparents were. They were
Mhm.
burned in the temple. And my dad was scattered like our whole family was. Somehow or another, he did survive. He joined the Polish underground and he resisted. He fought for his life. He was caught. He was put into a camp and then another camp. He escaped two camps, actually, at one point
Oh.
jumping off a train, taking him to a death camp. And finally, to end up at a death camp very close to death. I mean, so close that they actually walked him out to a death pit. And a German officer said, "Hey, he's healthy enough. Put him in a work camp." And by some stroke of luck, my dad was sent to work with Oskar Schindler. And so my dad is on Schindler's List, but more than that, he worked with Schindler closely, and they became close enough that by the end of the war, my dad actually drove Schindler and his wife and children out of Germany, and uh, and actually drove the car. I believe it was a lorry.
Wow.
And so, yeah, my dad, like if any of you saw Schindler's List, the man who ran the camp, the SS officer who ran that concentration camp, used to go out on his balcony and shoot people every morning. My dad actually had hunted him down. So the American military, for a short stint, they appreciated his 9 languages. He had learned most of them on the street or in the camps during the war, and they did become an interpreter at Yalta, which were border conferences and peace treaties, and but they in short time recognized that my dad had visual recognition of that man, and they enrolled him into the what was called the denazification program. So, like you mentioned, Nazi hunter. My dad was a Nazi hunter, and he actually found that man, and found SS men, brought them to Nuremberg, which was Nuremberg, Germany, where the war trials were, which is the biggest and first of its kind. And those men had a fair trial and were hung. So I don't know. That was ultimate retribution, of course, for my dad, I think. But he had other parts of the war too. He smuggled Jews out of Russia, and that was called Exodus. And but so what a struggle to
Yeah.
finally make it to America, and then to find out everybody had been killed, and then and only then to uh, sail up to Ellis Island and the Statue of Liberty. And what a proud immigrant my dad was, to eventually become naturalized and become a citizen. And back then, my dad, it was a huge thing to become naturalized as an American citizen. And my dad was so very proud of his American citizenship. And he came here with nothing. And he came so I could have a better life and he could have a better life. And he came to make a new life in America and
Yeah.
enjoy all the freedom and opportunity, and which, like so many have through really the centuries. The backbone of America is that immigrants who came in pursuit of a free life.
Absolutely.
So that's a little bit more about my dad. You were asking about Renewed Democracy 250.
Yeah. So that's a fascinating story, by the way. I didn't realize the Schindler's, the connection to Schindler's List and such. Maybe I did know some of that back way back when, but senior moment, I guess. In any case, we're here and it's here now. And actually, no, it's not. It is. Let's go back about 3 or 4 months ago. And when you called me up, and I think we were both kind of feeling a bit, I don't want to say helpless, but our hands are tied in so many ways. We see things going on in the world, we're concerned with them, and what can we do? It's very frustrating. I know that some people who maybe don't have as strong a constitution as we do, or maybe the perspective that we do. I mean, this is extremely emotional for people, the state of this country. And oftentimes I think we feel alone. But you reached out to me because you know that we've been friends for a long time and we're like-minded. So, and that's how you presented the intent to me to gather a group of like-minded people. Um, because you actually want to take action, right? I mean, you want to do something, right? But you don't not sure what to do. Is that it?
Well, that's where I was about 3 months ago.
Okay.
I feeling somewhat helpless, knowing that I needed more community, that I wanted to make a bigger difference, not sure what to do, short of writing a letter, making a call to a politician, maybe giving some money to an organization or showing up to a protest. Wasn't really sure what I could do and wasn't feeling that anything that was obvious like that was going to make a difference. Posting on social media, none of that it would seem to be adding up. So I reached out for friends, like John is saying. I reached out to people in my community, people I knew that were like-minded, And I knew I have a past that's entrepreneurial. I've had a lot of startups in my life and a lot of success with that. And I knew that if I could just gather people, not only would we get the company of each other and have community, which was great as opposed to being alone, but we would gather in numbers. We'd have more resources, and more people got together that could invite even more people, and that we could encourage community outreach, and we can encourage education and encourage growth of our organization, and just gather. Let's just gather, and then talk about what we're going to do, how we're going to educate people, how we're going to invite people, how we're going to grow, and what we're going to do when we get larger. And I just wanted to start, and I did. I started with about 15 people, and most of those 15 people were people that were willing to give some time and brought some expertise. And before long, we were organizing. We had a name, a mission statement. We were branded with a logo. We had core values. We had different teams and broke out to an education team and an outreach and marketing team. And we got a website going and social media going. Then, less than a month ago, we got a weekly Thursday call going where we've had great national speakers. We've had some great speakers in the last few weeks every Thursday at 8:30 p.m. and
Eastern
that's
time.
Eastern.
Yeah.
Yep, that's Eastern. We have a 1 hour call where a guest speaker comes on and offers us some good education and insight into what's going on. And there's a portion where people can ask questions and answers, Q&A. There's a portion where people can introduce themselves to the community. And then there's other portions where we talk about education or, like I said, social media or website and outreach like that. So these calls have been growing every week, and the community is growing every week, and new people are showing up, people are stepping up, and I'm getting new resources, and it's kind of happening a lot on its own. And boy, it just shows me how many people are not happy with what's going on, and how many
Yeah.
people want to do what I did, have just an organization and have some type of structure so they can come join a community and make a difference. That's what we are. We're Renewed
Yeah.
Democracy 250.
Yeah. I want to make clear too that this is a nonpartisan organization. We're not Republican, we're not Democrat. I mean, I mean, I don't even know what if people belong to different political parties. I don't belong to any particular uh, political party. I mean, I don't contribute to anything, but I do consider myself to be a libertarian, which is kind of a mixture of both. Look for small government, but stay out of our personal lives. And I'm very concerned, but what I like about it is I don't know what to believe when I listen to the news. And this community gives me an opportunity to listen to people from around the country and who are sharing things that are actually happening in their lives, that things that they are witnessing for themselves. And I believe them much more than I believe the news. There are a lot of people now discontent with government, and it's on both sides of the fence. There was a rally, there are protests now. I think more than ever, it's almost like a repeat of the '60s. Uh, in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, it seems like America's kind of rolling back to a time, a different day and age, where the government is trying to get us to do that. Um, if you,
Well, let me jump in and say that I think in talking all this politics, because, like you said, you're not used to having like a politically driven,
yeah,
type of podcast. So I think it's important to differentiate between partisan, which is Republican and Democrat,
hmm
and libertarian and independent, right?
right,
And democracy. So the word Democrat sounds like democracy. Democrats are our party, Republicans are our party,
right,
right? Um, we are in favor of democracy. We are nonpartisan, but let's not confuse the word democracy with Democrat.
I
So
like that. Yeah,
we simply are in an organization to say we we honor our democracy and the Constitution. We are a free country, and we're not perfectly free, but we are a free country. We're afforded rights and constitutional rights, and we have, a lot of those mirror human rights here in America and due process. And we stand to uphold our democracy. And what we've been seeing is that, as much as we can tell, our democracy is eroding. And it's happening across the board. Some of it's more obvious than other places, and so some people have felt it more than others. But my theory is, given time, many people will be affected by their loss of freedoms, or their loss of democratic rights. So I just wanted to differentiate. I'm sorry to
No,
interrupt.
no, no, no. I think that's perfect. That was said much more clearly than I was trying to do. No, I absolutely agree with you. This is about democracy, and I participated in the No Kings parade here in Richmond
Mhm.
yesterday. And why did I go? I went because I I've been dealing with fear all of my life. And I'm going to back up a few years to the Gainesville murders. When I was going to school at the University of Florida, I was about right near graduation when the Gainesville murders occurred, um, where I forget the number of students that died, six, seven students died. Um,
Yeah. What year was it, John?
it was right before I was about ready to graduate. So it was, I think, in about 89 or 90.
Yeah, I left Gainesville in '87.
So there was a serial killer in Gainesville, Florida,
I remember.
who was killing college students. And in fact, it shut the college down just about. I mean, the president said, if you're a student here, you can leave. We understand that there's danger here. I was working at a hospital, working my way through school at the time. So I would hear all these stories about what was going on in the crime scenes and everything. I felt very close to it. And my mom was saying, please come home, please come home. But I learned back then, and I feel the same way now, in fact, much stronger, that once you start running from fear, you never stop running. And I was not going to run from a possible serial killer. I was going to not put myself in danger. I wasn't going to be stupid about things, walk down dark alleys or anything. But I was going to be real about it and say, I'm not a female college student. He's not really after me. Uh, so, I decided to stay and I decided to stand firm. And I believe that to be true today. That's why I went to that protest, is because there was an element of fear that um, was being put out by the administration, that you shouldn't go to these protests, you shouldn't dissent, you shouldn't speak your mind. And I feel very strongly that we can't let that go. We have to address our fears. We have to stand up now. And this was touted to be the largest protest in U.S. history. Um, and I think they were downplaying the numbers. From what I was hearing in the local news, they were saying hundreds of people. No, no, no. There were thousands of people there, lining the streets in Richmond.
The National Park Service estimated over 10 million, just to
Yeah,
give you an idea. So it's hard to know if 10 million would be exact, but I'm confident to tell you it was millions and millions of people. So, let's not rely
that's
on our.
democracy in action, though. Being there, no matter the number of people that were actually there. I mean, I saw a huge number of people, but it was democracy in action. People on the streets gathering together, of all different shapes and sizes, colors. I mean, it was awesome. And in Richmond, it took place in the Capitol Square area, which was in earshot of the governor's building, and right there by the bell tower, and these immense, oak trees. You could feel the history there, with the people and the energy. You know, um, I was a little scared. I didn't bring my family. My wife does not deal well with crowds. It would have been bad for her. But I didn't want to bring my kids. I was fearful for them. But now I regret not doing that because democracy is about everyone. Um, and they need to learn about democracy. But I felt like it was dangerous because um, there were people that were violent yesterday across the country, but it wasn't from the protesters.
Yeah, can I speak to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, in Utah there was a shooting. Somebody just started shooting into a peaceful protesting crowd. I forgot where, but someone else yesterday ran their truck into a crowd.
It was in
Yeah,
Virginia.
yeah, I was in Virginia. Wow. Um, yeah, there's always going to be those people out there that, some people would like to always blame the protesters and call the protests violent. Well, in those circumstances, and I have seen no reports at all of violent protests, and they were several thousand protests. They were protests that translated straight over into Europe and really all parts of the world. This was an international protest against no kings, meaning no authoritarianism,
Right.
right? No, and but I know there were upwards of 2,000 protests in America, and don't see a single report of violence from the protesters. But nevertheless, like we heard in LA, yeah, in LA, when I heard the governor speak and I watched lots of video clips, I did see there were isolated incidents of violence for sure from the protesters. But all in all, I feel there was much more instigation. And
Yeah, like the reporter being shot by rubber bullets.
yeah, I mean, so I mean, this is not a good situation, but so if you could imagine on a different scale when my dad was growing up, did he have fear? Well, he had fear for his life, and not just on an odd one-off where, somebody gets violent and a protester gets hurt or someone resisting gets hurt. Everybody was being killed who resisted the regime, the Nazis regime. So my dad raised me to remember that, yeah, there is some risk involved. Certainly, if you were an undocumented immigrant yesterday, maybe you
Hmm.
didn't want to show up to a protest. You
Right.
could be detained and then without legal due process and thrown out of our country. People are in these areas where ICE is coming. Some of them are in the process of getting legal citizenship or at least legal residency. And even though they're playing by the game and they've applied, and even though they're paying taxes, and by the way, people are paying taxes, undocumented immigrants paying taxes get very little, if no, reward for that. They get no benefits at all, but they still pay into our system. And so here they are paying taxes. Here they are trying to get their paperwork straight. Maybe they did come here illegally, or maybe they're undocumented fully. But those people are scared. They're cooped up in their houses now, and they're keeping their
Hmm.
children there too, and they're scared to even come out. Like I said, some of these stories just sound too familiar to when I was younger and my dad shared with me. But what I mostly wanted to say was that he instilled in me that despite the fear and the risk, that standing up for our freedom was not always going to be a pleasure, and it wasn't
Right.
always going to be easy, and that and so yeah, my name and my efforts are all over the Renewed Democracy 250, and so I know I have myself at jeopardy out there if the government were to get aggressive and come after folks like me down the
For
road.
what,
Uh,
though, is what makes me scratch my head because we are about democracy, and democracy seems to have a bad name. Uh,
yeah,
that is not right.
Yeah,
Uh,
John, look, we have amendment rights. We have amendment rights to speak out peacefully. We and
right.
protest. We have amendment rights to gather and assemble. But it looks to me,
Sure.
and it should be pretty obvious to most of our listeners here, that uh, the current regime and people at the top are not that concerned about our constitutional rights, and that they're doing their best to shut down opposition
Right.
to many of their extreme policy and changes. And so, yeah, it might not be constitutional for someone to come after someone like me. because I'm completely nonviolent and completely within my constitutional rights. But am I at risk, John? Let's be plain. I am, and it's not right, but I am. So, I put that fear aside, and I have stepped forward and organized. And our organization is growing by leaps and bounds quickly. And so, even people that are like, I just enrolled a large group of attorneys from New York City. They all run law firms, so they were apprehensive to really expose themselves. So, as
Hmm.
much as they were doing great work, and they have been doing great work, they were somewhat limited in their outreach because they were worried about repercussions to their law firms. Because why? Because it's happening. Law
Right.
firms that were against Trump are now paying the price,
It could
which is
very well
complete.
happen to either one of us. Now,
Yeah,
and I have a real problem with that. I have a real problem with the federal government coming down on dissenters when we're really just talking about democracy.
yeah. Well, we should all have a real problem with that. But sometimes I do my best to see like the MAGA point of view, but sometimes it completely eludes me. I just cannot
No,
understand how they.
I have to say, having this kind of libertarian mindset about a smaller government, I like the idea of having a smaller government. But I don't like the way it's been. I don't think it's really happening. I don't think the government's being smaller. I think the power, there's a power struggle going on, and executive power is becoming exponentially more powerful, whereas it should be more equally, I mean, it should be equally powerful with the legislative branch. And Congress really needs to stand up against that and keep that power, in check. And they're not really doing that. Um,
Yeah, I don't want to get lost in the details, but yeah, the
yeah,
judicial branch is scared too now. I mean, the
yeah,
judicial branch is a combination of we're not going to follow your orders, we're going to tie you up in legal process in court, and meanwhile, we're going to pursue these judges and call them criminals for
yeah.
upholding the
Rule of law
constitutional.
is not being applied. I have a big problem with that, chipping away at our constitution, not applying the rule of law. I mean, the Supreme Court gave Trump basically carte blanche. I mean, he has immunity.
Yeah, what that was the biggest that was the beginning there. Well, I mean, listen, our system of checks and balances is the foundation of our
Yes,
American democracy. Without it, there is no check on power. And the system was not perfect, but the system
I
worked
agree.
very well. So you have an executive
Best in
branch, a
the world,
legislative
really.
branch, yeah, and you have a judicial branch. And so if the executive or legislative branches don't have legislation that uphold the Constitution, they could be checked by the judicial. And if the executive gathers too much power, over influences the legislative, or in this case, if it's full Republican in the House and the Senate and the executive, the judicial branch is there to make sure that there's a check and balance against
Hmm.
the shift of power and make sure that the those changes mirror our Constitution, and that is seemingly out of whack completely. So intimidating the courts and abusing our judicial branch and weakening our judicial branch is literally weakening our democracy.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Um, so we've talked about fear, uh, and we've talked about how we feel about our democracy. And there was a comment through, I'm not going to say, but one of the family friends on my Facebook page when I posted about no kings. He was saying, what's the point of protest? It doesn't result, it's not constructive. You're not offering ideas. You're just offering the way it shouldn't be. And I think it's complete BS, honestly. I think we need to be, I think there's again, administration saying if you're not loyal to this administration, then you're not American or not patriotic, which I totally disagree. My family has long roots, very deep roots here in America, over 200 years, since pre-Revolutionary War, I believe.
Mm.
So I don't plan on going anywhere, and I recognize how my family has benefited from America and the freedoms that I enjoy. But freedom is not free. There is a cost to it, and we need to stand up. And this is why we protest. This is why, um, if we have a concern, that is our right to do so. It is not um, with it's not without consequence, and um, and it does result. It does have clear results. Look back at the civil rights movement in the '60s. That has been chipped away at in the that has been chipped away at hugely recently, but we have to come back. We have to we have to get going again, or we're going to lose. We are going to lose more rights. I don't think people see it right now. They don't see the true impact. But if you open your eyes and take a look, you will see. And I would much rather speak up and voice my concern now while I can and start joining communities of like-minded people so that I know I'm not alone because there is strength in numbers. And I don't know if, I was thinking about this yesterday at the rally. My fear of going to the rally and my fear of bringing my children and everything, it was really unfounded. It was very peaceful. I didn't get arrested. I didn't get hassled. There was no, I was like, all that was in my head. I worried about it. So maybe some of this that we worry about our democracy, maybe it is also in our head, but maybe it's not. And I don't think that it is. I think that there's an overwhelming amount of information and stories being pushed out there. It's an agenda, it's a strategy to overwhelm us with information to know what's really going on. It's all out there. People are very clear about their actions and what they plan on doing, and people are like, "Oh, okay." Even though, like you talk about, oh, there's no need to vote again, or there's no our problems with elections, they're going to be solved. No, they're not. They're being rigged. So
Yeah.
open
Boy,
your
is that a whole
eyes.
that's a whole nother conversation,
Yeah,
right?
I know. I mean, things are being twisted around, and especially I was thinking about this, how different words have they have different meanings now. Like different people are accused of doing this or that, but really it's the accuser doing doing that and
Well,
shifting the
listen.
focus. Again, I'm getting off my
Well,
going on
listen. News
tangent.
news is unreliable, John, and
Yeah.
it would be great if we had some very truthful and fact-based news agencies, and everybody was hearing the same message. But between the combination of social media and then
Yes.
news agencies, nobody knows what to think, and everybody's getting different information. So it's pretty that that's at part of what's going on. But I want to talk about not what the fear that's being instilled in our minds. It is, and is that part of the plan? It is, and is dividing our country part of the plan? Divide and conquer. We're more divided now than ever, and I
Yes.
would tell you that is very much a result of political efforts, our division, and uh, and the propaganda, more political agenda on that. So I want to talk about what we've seemed to have lost out of our mind. So, I have a lot of friends who are religious. I have a lot of friends who are very good people and they're educated people too. But seemingly they have forgotten their humanistic qualities. They've forgotten what like virtue is. If you're a Christian or you're religious, you can look up virtues and you can read about the virtues. And virtues have humanistic qualities to them. They're not about our pocket. They're not about our party. They're not about
Help thy
policy or
neighbor,
issue.
stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly like that. And if you were to go back to the basic principles of virtue, what it means to be a good human being, you would easily be able to see that the actions of the current regime are not mirroring that. Um, but let's not even go back that far to basic virtues and say we should be virtuous people. We should, and we should strive to be more virtuous and let that guide our life and let that guide our politics and social interactions and make our decisions for us based on virtue. Gee, I wish we were all more virtuous. I could be more virtuous myself. But that is a good starting place. Go back to our virtues and look and remind ourselves what it means to be a
But
good person with humanity.
I'm gonna play devil's advocate here, though. Isn't that what they're doing? Aren't they
Not
trying to instill virtues?
No, go back and read the virtues. I wish I had them in front of me. I could read them off to you one at a
Yeah.
time, you know they almost sound biblical.
Or is it
They're
morals
they're
morals
like
versus
they're
virtues?
well, no, virtue just
It's different things.
virtues are like morals. But
Yes.
they have humanistic morals we can call virtues. And you could easily pull them up while I'm talking because I have another 30 seconds to tell you. But let's
Okay.
not even go back that far to the idealistic thought of virtue and morals
Okay.
and humanistic thinking and behavior, which is what where we should be as human beings. But why don't you pull those up? And let me just tell you that I think we've forgotten as short as just 100, 200 years ago. Like your family dates way back here, but my family not so much at all, right? But America, short of the conquistadors, America was a place that really grew almost primarily from immigrants that were leaving other parts of the world, and they were leaving there because there was strife and there was oppression and there was poverty and there was struggle, and they wanted to come to America. They wanted freedom and opportunity above all, and they wanted to leave behind all of that oppression or poverty. They wanted to leave behind the political issues, and they wanted freedom, and America promised that for them, and that's what this country stood
Yes.
for so long. And so when you look back, just a short generation or two for most people, but maybe three or four for others, our forefathers left where they came from in the world, came to America and helped build America and helped breed America and gave us our homeland, our country land. And sure, it's never been perfect. We've certainly, decade after decade, continued through struggles here. But this country, up to a short time ago, had been as free as any place on earth. And our democratic system, with all its faults, had been working as well
Hmm.
around that freedom in our Constitution. Uh, and so we all got to enjoy that life and liberty. And I do believe that many, many, many people, especially people that are very disgruntled with our country, and especially people that are on the extreme right, and these MAGA people, have forgotten. They are so disenchanted with our government, and they want change so badly that they went and voted for this man, and they believe everything they read and everything they hear, and they believe everything he says, even though so much of it is proven to be incorrect and non-truthful. And they are willing to disregard all of his moral issues. Boy, there are so many. And they are just so focused on change because things haven't been right. And meanwhile, if you just look back in your family 100, 200 years, things are light years better for us now, even if through poverty, even through struggles, even through the issues we have in America, the inequality and discrimination that still remains here. We still are light years ahead. And I think people have forgotten where our families came from. It's easy for me to remember, John. My dad just came here. It's a generation ago.
Right.
Family emerged from struggle and war and death, and that's easy for me to know. It's just my dad. But if you were to go back and your great great grandfather was still alive, or in your case, maybe your great 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 grandfather,
Yeah.
200 years is a long time, and you were to hear their story of why they came to America and how they came to America, and and their belief in freedom and democracy, and then I think the people today would not be so disgruntled and so likely to empower criminals and so
Yeah.
likely to be forcing change and say, gee, I just want change. I don't really care how it looks like. I don't really understand or care about the fabric of my democracy. It's going to be fine until it comes into my front door or affects my life.
Yeah.
And so people, I believe, are short-sighted. They're short-sighted to understand what the loss of democracy looks like or means to them, but they're short-sighted to not remember where they came from and how much worse it used
Right.
to
Right.
be.
It's interesting. So you bring up my ancestors. So one of my ancestors, another John Curran, actually,
Mm.
was a sailor, and he worked on the East Indies Trade Company. So he was. This is back in like the early 1800s, late 1700s. Uh, those were slave ships. I mean, they were trade, spice ships and trade and such. But there's more to it. He was conscripted into the British Army. So he was a sailor. He was sailing. British Army comes up, takes over your ship, says, "You're now a British sailor. You're in the Navy now." Because he had a rite of passage, he had papers, but when you're out at sea, those papers can easily disappear, and so that happened to him. So, conscription was that happened all the time. And in fact, you see this now happening in other countries, whereas young military aged men are being conscripted. They're being brought into the army, not necessarily in this country, but in other countries. That still happens to this day. Uh, but my family's Irish for the most part, and they were up in New York State pre-Revolutionary War, but then they were left. I mean, they left and went to New Brunswick um, because they were seen as they were Irish citizens, and they were seen as being loyal to the crown, even though it was they left. They were kind of pushed out of the country, and they came um, back in like the early 1800s. So I mean, there was a period of years where they left, but this land is it's a special place to my family, and that's why I don't know. I think leaving the legacy of my family is very important, but I also think that I have personal accountability to provide a better future for my children and grandchildren and those who remain after me. Um, like I can see the history of my family and see how they built the the family, but it wasn't just handed to them. I mean, my one of my grandmothers lost her husband and went from Wisconsin out to Minnesota, um, and started a farm with like I think she had 6 kids. So no husband, 6 kids, covered wagon, going out to the frontier. Um, and you could see that they built a farm, and they're yes, they grew, the family grew and resources and so forth. You could see that, but it came through hard work. Um, People today need to take personal accountability for their lives, and I think a lot of people blame the government for their position in life, and maybe that's true. Um, Maybe that's not what I'm understanding about the appeal of an authoritarian government, but I don't want a king telling me how to live my life. I don't want anyone telling me how to live my life. I don't want to tell you how to live your life. That's what America's all about, right? Freedom, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Um, and if we don't know our history, like your dad, from personal history about your dad, Josh, and have shared that with myself and others, and that's enriched my life. It's given me a different perspective. Um, that's why I share my views. And that's what I love about Renew Democracy 250 is people come in with different views, different perspectives, and they tell it how it is, how they see it in their day-to-day life, because you just can't trust what's coming out of the news today.
I hear that. Well, I suspect we're getting close to the 1 hour mark, but you know what I did want to do is I did want to go through a very quick list of virtues, and I want to remind people. So we talked about reminding people about their ancestors, their ancestry, and where they came from, and where our people, how we got to America, right?
Mm-hmm.
And let's not forget how we got to America and why our forefathers came here. And we talked about sharing democracy with our children, and we talked about our rights to stand and fight against democracy and our constitutional rights. We talked. I talked about my family and my background. We've covered a lot.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go through some of these virtues, John, if you don't
Are
mind.
these
Because
the
to me,
Christian virtues that you're?
they are not. These are not
Okay.
Christian virtues. Some of them are biblical, are sourced from biblical virtues, but these are just virtues to aspire to live a better life and be a better person.
Okay.
Okay.
I get you.
And so, like I believe we all, some people not really caring about virtue. Some people caring about their pocket, their political agenda, their business. They're caring about themselves or their family, or they're caring about what they believe that what their own agendas are, their own social or personal agendas are, or maybe what their religious agendas are for their own community. But I'm not speaking about individuals, and I'm not speaking about our own pocket, and I'm not speaking about our community or even our own beliefs. I'm speaking about what it means to be a better human being. And to aspire to live a better life and be a better human being, okay? Because we all do live together on this earth, and no matter how different we are, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's the idea of justice. It's a virtue, and it involves treating others fairly, seeking common good, and there is courage. It allows people to face challenges, stand up for what they believe is right, make tough decisions, and there's temperance. And that's one of the four cardinal virtues. Choose between pleasure and moderation and extremity, right? Kindness, it's a moral virtue, and it's recognized as a value. And being kind to fellow human beings, okay? And then there is wisdom, of course, the ability to make sound decisions even when it's difficult, okay?
Or to be able to apply knowledge.
That's a great point. It's a great distinction.
There's a difference between knowing something and being able to apply it. So, okay, sorry.
No worries. All good. Honesty. Gee, I wish we had an honest president, but then again, many politicians just aren't. It's a key component of a happy and fulfilling life, the foundation for trust, foundation for healthy relationships, foundation for personal growth. You know how important honesty is. It's pretty hard to demand that our politicians be honest, but for the man who lies the very most, and I mean that, even for people who don't agree, how can our president spend more time lying than offering us the truth? There is.
Well, if you tell a lie long enough, it becomes the truth. And that's something I'm very concerned about these days, is that you keep hearing stories and they're totally false, but they keep being told time and time again, and then they become true. And from a history, yeah, it's and that's why we need to stand up, because we need to tell our own story and make sure that gets included.
Well, that points to our next virtue, responsibility. And it's a virtue that involves being accountable for one's actions and understanding that our actions impact others. Okay.
Yes.
Here's a Christian virtue, because not all of these are Christian. Charity. Love not just for God, but love for our neighbor. It's one of the three theological virtues across the board. Boy, am I seeing a lack of that, especially from people who say they're Christian, yet they're very neighbor. They're
And then they're
very neighbor.
shooting
They
the
have no
bird at
charity
people
for it.
as they leave the church parking lot
Unbelievable.
and cut them off.
Get
Uh,
them out. Get
yeah.
them out. They don't belong here. And I don't care about their
So,
rights. And I'm not going to help them at all. I'm going to completely oppose them. That is not charity.
so
Uh,
diversity um, has been come to mind a couple times as you've been talking. You know, diversity of thought, um, diversity of view. We are all unique people. Each and every one of us are unique individuals that bring something to this table. That is diversity. That is democracy. Democracy is diverse voices coming together.
it always has
It's
been,
it,
John.
and always has been.
Yeah, I mean, America is the great melting pot. I'm going to keep
Yes.
going, and I'm going to wrap it
Go
to you
ahead.
if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Empathy, the ability to understand and share the emotions of others, is a fundamental component of ethical conduct. If you don't care about other people and you can't understand or share their emotions, well, no wonder you want to oppose them. No wonder you
So
want them out of the country. No wonder you want to group them into. Okay,
so put
civic virtue. I'm going to go through a few more, John. I'm going to
okay.
talk right over you. Civic virtue, habits. So civic virtue is just what it sounds like. Dispositions or habits of behavior, direct citizens to subordinate their personal interest for the better of the community. Put aside your personal agendas for the sake of the greater. Okay. Generosity. So I could go on and
Yeah.
on, right? But I don't need to. I just want to share with you that I care as I get older. When I was younger, I didn't know so much about these things and I didn't really care. As I get older, uh, being a better person, showing up better in the world, and living a more honorable life is important to me. Maybe it's not important to everybody, but I'd like to think I still believe in people. And I'd like to think that many people that are listening would like to practice a better life and be a better person as good as they can. We know we're all imperfect. I know we'd like to show this to our children, and we would like to show them how to be as good a person as possible. And these virtues are just simply, some guidelines, and if you examine the world and you examine the current political environment, and if you say, yeah, these virtues are important, my morals are important, and is this really what's going on today in our government? And really look closely and put aside our personal agendas and beliefs. I think it's pretty obvious that this is not what's going on in America right now. I think if we look clearly, we could see that little by little, our constitutional rights are being challenged, and our democracy is worth fighting for, and continuing to work towards being a better human being and teaching that to our children is also extremely important. And I feel like those are some bottom lines.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, it just really you know, I think that's a great way to wrap up this call and give people kind of an opportunity to know about the founder of Renew Democracy 250 because I think people want to become a part of this group. Um, it's not it's a way to better educate yourself about what's going on and find a community of people that you can relate to and empathize with. Empathize is really being able to put yourself in their person's shoes, and kind of feel how kind of view the world how they may be viewing it. You'll never be able to walk in a person's I can't show it because the AI. Oh, maybe I can because this is a little thing, an Indian prayer about walking in your neighbor's moccasins. You know,
Hmm.
um, grant that I may not criticize my neighbor until I have walked a mile in his moccasins. This is from my grandfather actually, but we 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 need diversity. We need diversity of voice, and we're all different, and we need to encourage and value that. I think we all bring something to the table. It's not just one way or the highway. Um, And I encourage everyone to check out Renewed Democracy 250. There's a Facebook page. There's a YouTube channel. We're going to come out with our own podcast because that's going to replay the the main. It's going to the weekly meetings that we're having.
Well, let me plug it a little bit. So
yeah,
www.reneweddemocracy250.com, no spaces. All right, that website will give you access to a lot more about what we're about. We have a weekly call. It's every Thursday, like we said before. It's 8:30 p.m. That's an Eastern time. And there have been great speakers every week. You can come on our call and you can listen to the speakers. And
participate.
yeah, you can learn more about us and you can step up and participate even more if you want. But you can also feel our community and you can feel what it means, what it feels like to be part of a community with like-minded people. And even if you are not completely like-minded, I would say that if you're open, at least open enough to maybe hear and learn from other people or just get some different perspectives out there, maybe you're somewhere in the middle, that's fine. We do have the social media channels, as you pointed out, but these weekly calls have been great. We have the website, but there's plenty of room for people who want to either join, become more, get some education, have some community, and there's also plenty of room for people who want to become active, and we need that. We need more
Yes.
leadership desperately. So please come join. You are all most welcome, as long as you come peacefully. And of course, how else can I help you wrap this, John?
Yeah, no, I think you just did. I think you did just did. I appreciate your time, Josh, and your openness and your willingness to share your family's history, your family struggles, and kind of what brought us all together, and our hopes, and I don't know. I just encourage, the virtues. People, I follow a Stoic philosophy, which is also associated with virtues, because it's virtues help develop character, and I think we need to strengthen our character as a country, and you can be a part of that as well. All the listeners on this show, go visit the website, get involved. Activism has many different, I don't know, it comes out
Many
in many
different
different
faces.
ways. Yeah,
Yeah.
this podcast right here is activism. We're just talking about democracy, talking about our government and how it rules our country and our life and affects our worlds. Um, that's activism right there. So I invite
Cool.
you as all to join us. Check out the websites, check out the resources. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Please share, like, subscribe, comment, get the word out, because now is the time to do it while we still
True.
can.
Well, then, John, thank you for having me on on your podcast, and I appreciate your time too. And
We're going to have other people from the organization come on, and we're going to be talking about rights, I believe. That was something I really valued from one of the last meetings. If you're going to protest, which is an American right, to dissent, you want to do so legally. You want to do so safely. And there was kind of a couple slides that would help you prepare. I felt very, very well prepared. And again, like I said earlier on the show, I had some fears going in that were totally unfounded. I'm so glad I faced those fears. And
I think we're going to speak about constitutional rights in general, not just protesting rights. So
oh yeah,
I think your next
yeah.
speaker is going to be able to is a lawyer who's going to constitutional lawyer and civil rights attorney who's going to speak a lot about what our constitutional rights
Right.
are, and hopefully we'll keep those. So
Awesome.
again, I just want to thank you, and
Yeah. Thank you. We're going to end the call.
Long live democracy in America.
Absolutely. Peace, my brother. Thank you.
Thank you.